Olympos. The region of Olympos, including the island of Saria, makes up 1/3 of the whole island of Karpathos. It is the island's northernmost village and, until a few decades ago, the most populated. Today, Olympos has 500 permanent residents. One can travel by ship from Rhodes or Piraeus and disembark at Diaphane, the main port of Olympos. The discerning tourist can travel by plane, car, or on the ferries, which have daily schedules during the summer months. Pigadia Diaphane. The region of Olympos consists of a chain of mountains that flows one into the other. Kimaras, at 692 meters, is in the southern part of Olympos, and on the borders of the neighboring villages Spoa and Mesochori. The ever-cloudy Hatzivasilis, which is the highest peak in the area at 718 meters, the prominent Korifi at 588 meters dominates with its largesse at the north of Olympos and continues on with Oros at a height of 561 meters. At the northeastern side, another chain of mountains continues, Stioi at a height of 639 meters, Orkili at a height of 713 meters, and Malo at 635 meters. In Saria, the most prominent and grandest mountain, Pachis Vunos, the Fat Mountain, stands at 630 meters. The village is built on the northern slope of the mountain Prophetus Elias. It seems that the mountain was named Olympos during the pre-Christian years due to the grandeur of the mountain. From here, the village took its name. Housing, at a height of 250 meters, spans from one side of the peak to the other. At the top of the peak, there is a row of traditional windmills which look like medieval castles. From the top of the western part, there are steep slopes down to the rocky coast and rough sea. To the east, there is a picturesque valley which, during the heydays of agricultural productivity, was the prettiest, with running streams and rich flora. There is a gorge to the north, and in the south, a dominant mountain, Korifi. The sunset from Olympos has a unique beauty. Cloudy days offer a spectacular view, and it is a unique sensation to lay your eyes on the western coast and see the clouds climbing up towards you. Taking a stroll on the narrow cobblestone streets of Olympos, one can see the simple city housing, the stone which is everywhere. Transported to another era, the visitor can see the wise planning in which the inhabitants used to live close together. The traditional houses of Olympos are single-story, with separate quarters which were used as kitchens. The houses were divided into two parts: the main living area, called patos, and the loft bed, built above the floor on a platform where the family slept. In many old houses, there is a wooden pillar where the main beams of the roof were supported. pillar is carved with various decorations and is called Stilio Mandela. The houses are full of carved decorations, like the decorations of the pillars, as are the ikonostasi, which are the cupboards that hold the icons. Decorative plates line the shelves all over the houses. These were brought home by the diaspora from their travels. Loomed items, such as rugs and embroidery, also decorate the house. The women artisans of Olympos, with their creative abilities, handcraft these impressive decorations in the home. Also notable is the central church of the village, the Church of the Sleeping Virgin. It is of Byzantine architecture, with interesting icons painted during the Turkish occupation. And has a wooden carved templo of exquisite art. In the churchyard, called Plati, 3 dance festivals of the Olympians take place. The first is on Clean Monday, the second is on the 3rd day of Easter, and the third on the 15th of August to celebrate the Virgin Mary. In addition to this church, the whole community is full of smaller and very picturesque chapels. There are many windmills, not only on the mountain peaks, but even lower. Their mechanisms were very strong, and the main beam was pointed towards the airstreams that dominate the open archipelago. Here, the people of the region, with unbelievable toil, ground the grains which were gathered from the earth during the year. Some of these mills collapsed and were deserted. Besides the windmills, there were some watermills that were used during these days. Some of them are still preserved today. The visitor to Olympus can still see the surviving, old-fashioned social and economic structure, such as the traditional bakery, where women prepare the bread, the koulouria, the kouleris, made of barley, and other traditional baked goods, as they used to be in the old times. The blacksmith's shop, where the blacksmith still uses traditional tools and methods for the ironing. The cobbler, who still makes the strong and elegant stivania, a boot-like shoe, and the elegant traditional slippers necessary for the festive local dress. And the use of the loom, with which they still produce the fabrics for the women's and men's traditional dress, linens for the beds, and other necessities of daily life. The visitor is immediately impressed by the traditional costume, kavai, which is worn daily by the elderly women. It is a practical and very elegant costume, and gives a special grace to those who wear it. The costumes for the festivities are made with quite an artistic flair. On the eastern coast, you can see Diaphane, built in an amphitheatrical style, with an idyllic coastline, and most probably named so during the medieval years after a monk in the region. Permanent inhabitants began to live in the area from the end of the 19th century. The Afani served as the departing point for the farmers who traveled to Saria. After the Second World War, there was a development boom, and today, the Afani is the main port of Olympos and a tourist center. In recent years, a larger port was built in Diaphani, which promises more tourist development in the region. The road which links Olympos and Diaphani passes through picturesque pine woods. On the eastern side of Olympos, scenic beaches have been developed and are especially loved by the tourists. They are quiet and clean, with transparent waters and small pebbles and coarse sand. Just after these beaches, one can see the bushes, pine trees, and olive trees that dot the land. The beach side of Vananda is located a bit north of Diaphani and under the dominant and rocky hillside with a gorge full of bushes which grow deep into the ravine. South of Diaphani, there is a series of picturesque and clear sun beaches. Apokapos, Opsi, Kantri, Korokli, Kapi, Nati, Helios, Lala, and Agnondia. From Diaphani to Saria, there are deep slopes full of sea caves. These are ideal locations for the wild birds of Olympos. Passing Olympos by boat, one can see wild pigeons, seagulls, cormorants, cranes, and among these birds, the rare hawk of Eleonora. In the west, and under Olympos, there are two beaches called Thesis and Evgonimous. The main beaches in Saria are Yaplos, Palatia, Alimunda, Shalavronda, and on the western side, Mayalos. Since the old times, Karpathos was famous for its fish. Even today, the seas around this region are excellent for fishing. The region is protected by the Natura program, which oversees hunting, fishing, and the flora and fauna of the region. The demanding visitor to Olympos can experience the rich flora and fauna either on the land or at sea. In the southern regions, where the soil is mainly acidic, one can find woods filled with pine trees and bushes, and in the north, where the soil is more lime-like, only bushes thrive. The same occurs in Saria, where in certain areas there are small woods with pine trees. There are many picturesque natural springs that have been decorated with carved gurnas, marble bowls, and they are surrounded by water lilies. A large number of chapels are scattered in the rural areas of Olympos. Most of them are private. People who pass by don't forget to stop inside and light a candle. The scent of thyme is all around. The singing of the grouse fills the idyllic surroundings with grace, offering a rare feeling of beauty and purity to the strollers. There are some cottages around the northern part of Olympos called avlonas. There are 200 stables, small cottages with aloni, threshing floors, built in the eastern part of a fertile valley which is open to the northern exposure. This was the agricultural center of the region until immediately after the war, but now it has only a few inhabitants. In Avlona, one can admire the simply built structures and the sensible ways that the residents had organized their agricultural life. A bit north, and a little before the Saria Pass, there is an excellent natural port called Tristomos, 3 Mouths. It is called so because 2 small islands are located just in front of the opening to the port, which creates 3 entrances, and they make the port invisible from the open sea. It has been a safe refuge for the navigators through the ages. Today, just a few passing vessels visit the tranquil waters of Tristomos. The island, Saria, is separated from the land of Karpathos with a pass 100 meters wide. Some relics that have been found there show that the region of Olympos had been inhabited for centuries, at least from the 15th century BC. In the old times, two of the most important towns of Karpathos were flourishing. One was Vrikous, which is today called Vroukunda. Although there have not been systematic excavations, the region is full of relics of an ancient town which continued to flourish during the early Byzantine times. Among the many ruins of the ancient Vrikous, the visitor can see today dozens of carved tombs and a part of a Hellenistic wall. From the ancient Vrikous comes a very important sign which was found later on in Tristomos, the Doric voting, which is today in the British Museum. Famous in pre-Christian times was the Temple of Poseidon, which was probably located on the side of Karpathos, between Karpathos and Saria, and where the Chapel of St. Catherine is today. The second ancient town was Niceros, where the contemporary Palatia is in Saria. The safety of traveling by sea allowed the towns, which were on the seaside, to continue their growth during the Hellenistic, Roman, and pre-Christian centuries. The ruins of pre-Christian basilicas, especially of St. Sophia in Palatia at Saria, are impressive. In the same area, Palatia, a whole medieval community with strange one-room studio buildings, which are not similar to any other buildings that we are familiar with in Greece and in the Middle East, leads us to the conclusion that the housing is Arabic and was built during the occupation of Crete by the Arabs during the 9th through 10th centuries. The attacks by the Arabs, which started in the 7th century, changed the historical, political scene. The archaeological research tells of the destruction of Paleo-Christian basilicas in Karpathos in the middle of the 7th century. The sea could not provide safety any longer, and as happened in all of the islands of the Aegean Sea at the same time, the traditional seamen of Vrikous and Niceros asked for refuge in the mountains. And so they built Olympos in a place that was extremely protected. The choice of the place was made using defensive criteria. The original structures that were built were the castro, the castle, and Pyrgos. On the hill, they could see the archipelago and the surrounding area. Names of places like Oxo Camara, Mesa Castro, and others are left to remind us of the system of defense. In spite of the mountainous and barren region, the ability of the inhabitants to work on the land turned the soil into a fertile area, and Olympos, during the later years, experienced an acme of agricultural development and animal husbandry. In the beginning of the 20th century, there were 2,500 inhabitants in the region. At the slopes of the mountains, one can see many terraces that preserve the soil and create a fertile base for the growing of grains. In the valleys, one can see fenced properties, and in some places, old rural houses are still standing. snake-like paths lead to the longest and farthest places in the region of Olympos, which are carved and stepped from generations and generations of farmers. In spite of the desertion of the traditional farming and practices of husbandry, a lot of other cultivation of today offers various and eclectic ecological products, like vegetables, dairy products, and thyme honey. The visitor can still enjoy the delicious local bread, which is baked in a traditional oven. Macaroons, donuts, and other eclectic traditional delicacies. But Olympos is most famous in comparison to the other regions for the habits and festivities of the community. During the festivities and other family and social events, their traditional parties are exceptional. The two biggest feasts of Olympus are the Feast of the Virgin Mary on the 15th of August and the Feast of St. John on the 29th of August. Many people come to Olympos during the Feast of the Virgin Mary on the 15th of August because it is a time when the diaspora returns to their birthplace, and many visitors come from other villages as well. The feast is celebrated in the central church of the village. The elder women and the young ladies give an exceptional aura to the festivities with their traditional costumes. After the church mass, the icon is brought to the churchyard and congregants genuflect before it. After that, the feast is held for the locals, the diaspora, and for tourists in the region. In the evening, a great feast follows with improvised poems and songs, and a traditional dance follows through the night into the early hours of the morning. The feast and dancing continue into the next day. second feast is the Feast of St. John on the 29th of August. The Chapel of the Saint is located in Vrikunda and is in a large natural cave. The pilgrims arrive by boat from Diaphani or by foot from Avlona. After the evening Mass, a feast and dancing follow through the night, which was repeated the next day after the Mass. The feast continues even through the next evening and the day after that in Avlona. There is a special Mass held on the third day of Pascha, a Mass for the dead. The icon is marched through the church, and a traditional feast and dance are held. The visitor who comes to Olympos can enjoy the purity of nature at the beaches, in the forests, at at the springs, at small secluded beach coves, on the paths that lead to picturesque chapels, to farmhouses, to places of toil and hope. At the same time, he will find himself on a unique piece of land, in a traditional civilization, so unique and particular and special that it will be difficult for him to believe that this very rich tradition continues today. He will enjoy the feasts, the dancing, and the religious tradition. He will admire women in traditional costumes and the old Greek language. He will enjoy the ecological products and the traditional hospitality that the locals offer. With all of this, Olympos is open to the growth of tourism in the region for demanding visitors who wish to enjoy something unique and different from what is usually experienced. The variety of natural surroundings offers many alternative forms of tourism like mountaineering, trekking, and diving, while the rich, traditional heritage of the region is favorable for cultural tourism.